Believe it or not, after having that incredible experience with the pew cushion flying off at me, what I remember the most about that night is I slept like a baby, and I don't know why you would think that I would have been just wired. But maybe it was just relief that the very first part of this experiment actually delivered in spades. I mean, I went into that as nothing more than a ghost hunter, wanting, believing, and hoping that there would be evidence. And there was a ton of evidence. So maybe it was just exhaustion that it was like, wow, this actually went incredible. If I could ever go back there again, I think I would set up a ton of recording equipment in that courtyard, because when I woke up, again, I heard those children singing. It was brief, but I heard it again. And Chillingham Castle, it's really weird. It's like 3 hours away from civilization. I mean, it is on the edge of Scotland, and you drive 8 hours from London to get there. And it's not like the castle's in the midst of a neighborhood. I mean, it's away from everything. So I don't know where the singing could be coming from. I don't know, but I do remember hearing it again. And it was freaking me out to the point that I was like, am I like going crazy? Like, I'm hearing children singing. So that morning, everybody had breakfast but Joe, in which Justin told me, yeah, Joe is, he is not feeling this, man. He is really starting to freak out. And I was like, oh, shit. I want Joe to be freaked out, but I don't want him to be so freaked out that he completely closes off. And that was really hard about this is I don't want to film us on vacation just having fun all the time, because that's not a documentary worth filming. But I don't want Joe to be so freaked out that he completely shuts down and refuses to talk to anybody. That is not what I wanted. So if you watch the movie, you see me having that conversation with Justin on the side of the wall, which we're talking about this. And the reason we're filming on the side of that wall is because we're actually refilming a conversation we just had, which was at breakfast, which is the fact that Joe was completely shut down. And Justin felt like I need to go talk with him too and try to get him to loosen up just a little bit. And Justin was worried about Joe. So, but before we, got together to go review the footage or anything like that, you have this scene in the movie where you see me talking to Joe in the courtyard. And that was a, incredibly natural scene that just happened right when we were walking back inside. Joey was there. He walked past me, put his head down, didn't say anything. And I was like, yo, dude, hey, what's up? And, Justin just started filming right away. And that actual conversation and the film is like, a minute long. It was actually over an hour that we talked, because I could see on his face, he was scared of me. He honestly thought that I was going to put, LSD or some kind of psychedelic in his food, or I was going to poison him. And I just said to him, Joe, I'm not going to poison you. Like, dude, who do you think I am? And he was like, dude, I know you, man. When it comes to your films, you are Charlie Manson fucking driven, which I never knew that he had that view of me. I never knew that. And I agree that I am very driven when it comes to taking the camera where it never usually goes. I am very driven when it comes to, filming something, the way I see it, or just basically, picking a style and rolling with it and making sure all the parameters as far as, location and, just making sure everything is the way that I see it through my eyes. Yes, I am driven, but I never I never knew that Joey looked at me like, this kid will kill his own fucking mother to, get the film he wants, because I've never ever inserted myself in my films to the degree that I would control the outcome for the sake of the film. Now, what I mean by that is, however things are going to happen, they're going to happen. When I'm on camera, I can honestly tell you that I'm unaware of the camera. I don't want to know where the camera is. I don't care about the camera. I don't think about the camera. The only time that I think about it is when I'm behind it, when I'm directing. And yeah, I don't, very few things when I'm documenting will make me say cut, because I believe that in a documentary, you need to be filming all the time. Period. There should always be some camera running somewhere. You don't know when things are going to happen, so you got to keep the camera going. And very few things will make me stop filming. I mean, to be honest, I can't think of many things that would make me stop filming. I was just going to say maybe if somebody died, I would stop filming. But honestly, if somebody died, I would feel a responsibility to document the moment. I mean, I'm just being real as I think about it. But as I said to him, I'm not going to be a levying hand. Okay? My role in this is to be the eyes for the audience and an explaining voice, a narration to walk people through the experience. It's not to give them an opinion. It's not to let them know my opinion. And it's certainly not to force the hand of anything. We don't outline my documentaries. They are as real gets. And I said to Joe, first off, as your friend, I would view putting something chemical, sneaking it into your system. To me, that's poisoning somebody. A, I love you like a little bro. B, I'm not like looking to break the law and go to jail. I mean, like, what if I was crazy enough to do that and something horrible happened and Joe, like I said, got injured or died or something like that? That's not fun. That's not a documentary I want to make. That's a horrible. But he was convinced. He was really convinced that I was going to do that to him. And he just said to me, he said, well, listen, dude, if you do that to me, not only am I done with this documentary, like, I'm done with you. Like, we have no friendship. It will be the end of it. And that was crushing, man. Because he meant it. He was as serious as a fucking heart attack. He was just like, we will be done. And I said, well, Joe, I need you to just commit to this process. Understand that, yes, I do think I know where this will all go. But again, I'm not forcing it. I can promise you, I will not poison you. I will not sneak anything into your, mouth when you're sleeping or put something into your food. But I do need you to commit to this. And I said to him, if you don't want to, it's not too late. I can replace you. I'm sure Kieran knows somebody that would take on this role. And that just pissed him off. That pissed him off every time I would say that. Because he would go back and forth. He'd be like, so just that easy, huh? You can just replace me. And I'm like, well, no, wait a minute, dude. I'm saying I want you. You're saying it's unfair and you don't want to do it. So then I say I'll get somebody else and you freak out and act like I'm, like I'm somehow screwing you over. So I said, no, man. And I looked at him too, and I could tell he had these bags under his eyes. And to be honest, Joey's a rock star. He always looks like $1 million. And I said, by the way, man, why the hell are your eyes so dark? And he was like, well, I mean, Mary Beth has to do her investigation tonight, and she's been on sleep deprivation, and I just, wanted to make sure she was okay and that she stayed up, so I stayed up with her. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, so you've been staying up as well? Well, for her. I'm like, for her? And he's like, well, yeah, I mean, staying up's hard. She might need some company to stay up. And I go, but that, Joe, that's her job. It's like, well, I know. And I'm like trying to go, why is Joe? I go, wait a minute. Are you afraid to sleep in your room? Because we gave him the one bedroom that was alone in the basement. And he pauses. He's like, no. I'm like, dude, you're afraid to go down in that room and sleep. And he's quiet. I'm like, is that what's going on? And he's like, do you know how haunted this place is? Do you know how haunted this place is? He's like, everywhere I turn, dude, I'm hearing footsteps. I'm feeling like someone's with me. My hair's standing up on the back of my neck. And the whole fucking time I'm thinking that I can't even drink water because there might be acid in it. All this stuff. It was brutal. I was just like, Joe, please go inside and get some sleep. Please. I'm like, you are just going to the next level with this. Please go get some sleep. Which, to be honest, I think he may have gotten a maximum of like an hour, maybe two of sleep. And it was brutal. I was just like, man, you got to get some sleep, brother. You really got to get some sleep. So again, I think he did for like an hour or two. And then I reconvened with Kieran. And what was really interesting, if you look at the film, I reconvened with Kieran to show him the evidence that I captured. Because I did have a couple hours to do the evidence review from my camera. And if you see the outtakes and during that scene, as I'm talking to Kieran, the lights are going on and off in the castle. And this started happening like literally as I walked in the door to sit down with Kieran to go over the evidence. The lights started coming on, coming off, coming on, coming off. And then they started doing it every time I would start to talk. So Kieran could ask me 3 minutes worth of questions. So the lights would stay on in the castle. And the second I would start to speak, they would go off. Almost like the castle was like messing around with us. Now this could have it's a castle, and all the wires are old. So maybe this happens all the time. But we did speak to Graham, and Graham is the caretaker. And Graham's like, no, this doesn't happen. I'm like, huh? And he's like, no, we haven't had issues with this. I go, with lights turning on and off? He goes, nope. I go, did you see what? He's like, no, I saw it. I'm like, huh, that's not weird to you. And he was like, we haven't had this happen. So that was really weird. I was like, this is crazy. But after I met with Kieran, Graham had came up and said to me, just so you know, my wife is upset with you. And I said to Graham, oh my God, was it the swearing in the chapel? And he said, no, didn't you hear what I said during the history tour? And I had admitted to him, I said, Graham, I was completely exhausted and I sincerely apologize. I'm like, but yeah, I slept through most of that history tour. And he goes, no, there is Eleanor, lives in the chapel. And it's the one place John Sage doesn't go to. And he said, and you're begging John Sage to come to the chapel where Eleanor is at. And he's like, so when my wife heard this, she was terrified for Eleanor. And I just felt like shit. I was like, oh God. And I said, well, can you introduce, your wife to me later? And he said, okay. And shortly after, probably an hour or two later, I met her. And she still had tears in her eyes. She's like, I just hope John did not go in there because there's no protection. And that's when I started to realize that the viewpoint of the paranormal and ghosts and spirits, it is dead serious over there. They are not playing. They all believe, they believe. It's different in America. People, there's a lot of believers, but there's still a stigma if you believe that you're kind of wacky. And even though 70% of the population believes, over there, you're wacky if you don't believe. So Eleanor, Graham's wife looked at Eleanor like her child. So in her mind, I just brought potential danger and harm to Eleanor. So right away I'm going, fuck, this is bad news. Especially because at this point, Graham and his wife and Chillingham Castle, I haven't told you this little tidbit yet, they have no idea about the chemical, alteration side with Joey. Just because I figured it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. And there's no way they would have said, yeah, come on in, bring in some drugs, you know what I mean? Like, there's no way. So I just took it upon myself to just say, well, I'm going to do it, and if they get pissed, and once it's on film, it's on film. And maybe that's the side that Joey saw of me, where he was just like, dude, when you want something, you're committed to it, and you'll go whatever length you have to go to. Which, again, I only see that to a degree. I wouldn't go to the length that I'm going to poison somebody. I mean, I think that would be obvious, but it wasn't obvious to Joe, and I didn't know how to take that. So we do interviews with everybody before we're going to meet together. And Mary Beth hasn't slept. And I could see that she's just in a mood. She's not happy. She doesn't really want to do interviews. She just wants to get the investigation over with. And that is, things really started to settle in on me, where I started to feel really bad about this whole idea and myself. Because all these people I love, Justin is concerned that I'm hurting Joe. Joey no longer trusts me, it appears. Mary Beth, who I adore, is just disgusted by the sight of me, doesn't want to see me, is not having fun. Just, in her words, wants this, quote, whole fucking thing over with. Like I said, at first I saw the castle as the antagonist, and now suddenly, somehow, I became this antagonist. So I get to the point where I just wanted to get to it and just get it over with. So we reconvene right away, and after going through the evidence, I show them the evidence of the pew again, where Joey is like, look, I think I know what happened. After watching the evidence, he's like, I think I know what happened up in the chapel. And I was like, really? Wow, because I don't, and I lived through it. And so, as you saw in the film, I said to everybody, I said, well, let's go up there. Let's try anything and everything you want. Because again, I had the benefit of experiencing it. So I know damn well there's no possible way that this was any sort of natural accident, at all. And they go up there and they see that this cushion's about 12 feet long. It's got this like rubber foam on the inside of it. It's heavy as can be, probably 20, 30 pounds. And, they quickly discover there's just no way that this is possible. Justin couldn't even throw it as fast as it moved. Like literally grabbing one end and just whipping it as hard as he could to the other side. He couldn't throw it fast enough. And I could see on Joey's face and everybody's face that this whole thing is becoming more and more scary because all of these events are being proven to be real. So when we go back downstairs, what was even more fascinating is that there was an additional EVP that was captured. When I was in the chapel, right before the pew cushion got thrown at me, right before, there's an EVP of a little girl's voice in the control room with Justin, Joe, and Mary Beth that says, he's not there. Little girl's voice, he's not there. And then the pew cushion gets thrown. Well, if you go back and consider what Graham was saying and his wife, is that is where Eleanor is. So how we took that was Eleanor is telling my team he's not there, meaning John Sage, because I'm calling out for John Sage while in the chapel. So it's almost like Eleanor leaves the chapel quickly to tell my team he's not there, to get me to stop. And then when I don't stop, she throws a pew cushion at me. Which is crazy. But that's exactly how it lined up. The timing of it was perfect. You know, you also saw in the film, there's that time where the door opens and we go and investigate the door opening. This happens like during our evidence review. By the way, this happened all the time. Doors that would literally jam against concrete if you pushed them. You know, you'd have to put force behind them, you know, to get them to close and shut, because they would get stuck if they opened too far. And if you pushed them too hard up against the door, they would get stuck against the rock bottom of the door. So there's no way for any of these doors to just slightly slide open. They were opening throughout the church the whole time. I mean, this literally happened constantly. It was something that was so regular that it almost got to the point where it was expected. If you look in the film, when the door opens and, you know, Justin and I are with Kieran while Mary Beth is doing her investigation, you see us all kind of slowly look over at the door, like almost like we're not reacting, like jumping out of our skin. And the reason we didn't is because it was like the 30th time that it had happened. It had happened so much. You know, so that was going on the whole time. That happened, you know, when I was doing my investigation as well. We caught a number of breaths, like, there was knocking, you know, just like this, constantly. Footsteps behind and around me constantly. We caught voices chit-chattering, like a group of people chattering. The sounds of horse hooves, like clunk, 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 clunk. Just all kinds of stuff during my investigation. It was crazy. So we all basically agreed that, yes, during part one of the experiment, Chad went in as a normal investigator that was just stoked. And yes, he captured paranormal activity. So that's all set up. Round one done. So it's finally about time for Mary Beth to do her sleep-deprived investigation. And she has not slept in over 48 hours. She's maybe slept 3 or 4 hours in the past 72. Okay? Just from all the driving and the excitement and then, you know, her deciding to swap with me, which was a great call. And so it's about time, you know, for her to go on her investigation. And she is a zombie. She is not in a good mood. In fact, she was downstairs right before it was time to go. And I came downstairs and I said, hey, it'll be about, 15 minutes and then we'll be ready to go. And she doesn't say anything. And I go, hey, you all good? And she turns and looks at me and she goes, what do you give a fuck? You don't give a shit. Get out of here. I was like, Jesus. Wow. I looked at her, I was like, MB, what the hell? And she's like, just get the fuck out of here. I mean, she was in a bad place. And again, I know she has a mean streak, but she's a sweet girl. And I was just like, wow, man, I'm not having, again, I was walking up the stairs going, I hope this pays off, man, because I'm not going to have a friend left on planet Earth if this doesn't. And also keep in mind the whole time, I don't know what Kieran thinks of any of this. His role is real simple. He's a parapsychologist and a doctor, and he is supposed to watch over us. He is not allowed to intervene. He is not allowed to intervene. That's the one thing we agreed upon. He knows up front that he doesn't know everything. For example, he knows that I'm telling Joe that there's going to be an investigation that involves chemical alteration. Not in a million years does he suspect that there's any kind of illegal drug, or even that I'll actually go through with it. He knows this is a psychological experiment. So he doesn't even really know what's going to happen. So I don't even know what Kieran thinks. I know Justin is really concerned about Joe. I know Joe hates me. And now Mary Beth is like, get out of my sight. I don't want to see your presence. So at this point, I'm not having fun either. I am just like, let's get this over with, you know? So we start out with her, and I told her she can go anywhere she wanted. And she goes straight to John Sage's dungeon, where her distant relative that we discovered, Sage's former wife / girlfriend, was killed during sex. That is actually related to her. She goes right there, bang, right into the dungeon. And she goes in with a vengeance. I mean, she has an attitude. She is calling John Sage every name in the book. I mean, I've never heard so many swear words come out of her mouth before. It was crazy. She was super intense about it. And I kept thinking, man, this place is going to pop off because she is provoking like, harder than most people I've ever seen. But she's tired. And after about 10, 15 minutes of it, she's just lost her energy. She just doesn't have the energy anymore. And she's walking around and, the times in between her provoking are getting longer. Like when she first walked in, she would say something like, John Sage. Pause 3 or 4 seconds. Where are you at? I'm right here. And by the end of it, she'd be like, are you here, John? And it would be, 5 or 6 minutes before she'd say anything else. And as we're all watching her, kind of the same thing. We all started out kind of chit-chatting and discussing her condition and everything that's going on. And we're, talking back and forth, and then the back and forth gets slower and slower. And then towards the end of the investigation, we're barely speaking. And then at the very, very end of her investigation, I had fallen asleep once, I think for about 10 minutes. Justin had fell asleep briefly, on and off. Joey had fallen asleep. I think Kieran stayed up for it all, but by his own admittance, he was very groggy. And nothing happened. Finally, after a couple hours of it, Mary Beth was like, hey, listen, guys, I don't feel anything. I don't hear anything. I don't see anything. I don't know what was going on when Chad was doing it, but this place is nothing's happening, And she's like, honestly, I just want to go to bed. I'm done with this. I need sleep, in which I said right away, and I said, you know what? I'm wondering if nothing's happening because that's not what she desires. She desires sleep. So her focus is not really on, the paranormal. By the way, if you guys hear some banging going on, there is a construction company next to me working on renovations. So I'll try to compress most of it out. But Mary Beth wanted nothing to do with the paranormal. She just wanted to go to bed. That's it. She barely slept. She was tired. She missed her son. I called it off. I said, okay, she's been there for 2 hours. She's been provoking like crazy in the heart. She also went to the dining hall. She also went to the chapel and provoked on every level with real attitude. If nothing has happened by now, then, there's probably not going to be anything that will happen. So we brought her in, and I'm like, so, how'd it go? And she's like, nothing. I'm like, nothing. She's like, I didn't experience anything. I'm like, okay, so what do you want to... And she cuts me off right away, and she's like, where's the fucking bed? I need to go to sleep. I'm like, go ahead. You're good. You're good. So that night we ended up actually, calling everything because if she's sleeping, we can't really film, and she needs sleep. And, this whole thing is also building up to, Justin and Joey's investigations, which are admittedly going to be the most intense. as Justin, I don't think has really even taken time to consider his role in this entire thing is sensory aggravation, which is the one that I wouldn't do. The chemical alteration I would do just because I feel like that would be more fascinating than it is scary, just to see what my mind does in a certain state. I don't know why that doesn't really scare me, but it doesn't. Sleep deprivation scares me because I don't like when I don't feel like I'm like quick on the ball, you know what I mean? Like if something happens, I want to know my reaction times are fast. And when they're not, that's unnerving to me. Obviously, the normal investigation is the normal investigation, but sensory aggravation, the idea that something could just, scare the bejesus out of me or make me feel, ill or something like that, going into an investigation where I'm not in control of my emotions and my, physical well-being, like that scares me. Justin's is the one that I didn't want to do. And he has no idea what he's going to do yet, and nobody else does. And I have not shared that even with Mary Beth. And I knew it would freak him out. Having said that, we literally just called it a night. And again, without even speaking to me, Joe just beelines out of the room, doesn't say goodnight, doesn't say anything, no words, nothing. Justin just looks back at me and says, man, I hope this works out, man. And yeah, everybody went to bed, and that night I sat in the courtyard. I literally went and sat in the direct middle of the courtyard, right at the bottom of the stairs. And I did say a prayer. Like I said, I don't pray much, and I did say a prayer, and I just said, God, if you can hear me, I'm really just trying to show what our minds can do and the power of the mind. Please do not allow anybody to get hurt. And these people matter to me, man. These are my family. They're beyond friends. They are my family. I'm like, just please, when this is all said and done, please see them back to me and hopefully to hold me in the same good graces, because I was really worried at this point that I was going to lose at least Joe, if not more, as my friends. And with that prayer, I went to bed knowing that the following day was going to be incredibly difficult. So I wake up the following morning, and I'm up before anybody else is, and right away I head to the courtyard to see if I could hear the singing again. And it was one of those marble sky days, so I didn't really know what time it was, but it was indeed later, much later than when I had heard the children before. So I did not hear any children singing, but I was up before everybody else, and again, I'm looking in the windows, and I'm like, man, that one mannequin looks creepy, and it was this really elegant female mannequin looking down, and she's wearing like this jewelry, and then I look over, and there's this other mannequin that's, a little bit higher, but on the left side of the wall, and it's got like this plaid jacket on, and I'm like, that's creepy too, and I look at the one closest to me, which is over my left shoulder up against the wall, and I'm like, man, that mannequin is like really, really tall, and it's holding its hands up in a weird way. And I look up, and the mannequin lowers its hands and looks back down at me, and I jump out of my skin again. And once again, it's Sir Humphreys, the owner of the place. Again, twice he's scared the living shit out of me. And I see him just shaking his head like, you idiot. I kept thinking, man, I do not want to run into him now. I haven't even met him yet. And both times that I've actually looked at him, I jumped and screamed like bloody murder. So he's obviously looking down like, who is this fool that keeps coming out and, freaking out every time I look at him? So I know at that point, Sir Humphrey is throughout the building. And I'm like, wow, that's creepy. So during breakfast that morning, I'm talking to Justin. And he tells me that when he was sleeping, he heard a bunch of walking, like loud as can be, and doors shutting and all this stuff. And he walked out of his room and was totally freaked out, like, oh my God, what is going on? It turns out it was Sir Humphrey. So without anybody telling us, he had come back from wherever he was at, and, he had spent the night in the castle. And I kept thinking, well, God, that sucks because we don't know when he came back. So during Mary Beth's investigation, if there is any evidence that we captured, it might have been Sir Humphrey. Like we knew for sure when I investigated that he was not there. Nobody was in the castle. Um, but after spending a lot of time going over the tapes and footage during Mary Beth's investigation, nothing. And that blew me away because Mary Beth had experienced plenty when she wasn't doing her sleep deprived investigation. I mean, like she experienced the walking sounds, and like I said, our first night there, the blue boy and the door opening, or the door open, which they say is the ghost of what they call the blue boy. She heard the singing when we ate pizza. Like so, she had had plenty of experiences there, but during her investigation, when she was not interested whatsoever in capturing anything and just wanted a bed to crash and go to sleep during that nearly 2-hour investigation in which she was in the dungeon where her relative had been murdered. She was in the John Sage dungeon where her relative was murdered, provoking like crazy for over 2 hours, walking through some of the reportedly most haunted areas of the castle. And she got nothing. Not an EVP, not, footsteps, no voices, nothing flying around, nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was really weird. The only thing that happened during her investigation is right when she was walking into John Sage's dungeon, we had a door open. Which you see in the film. But again, like I said, guys, this happened constantly throughout the castle. This was to the point where we'd be like, was that a door opening? Yep. A few minutes later, it would shut. Did that door just shut on its own again? Yep. We'd go and check it out, and there'd be no breeze, nothing. I mean, this place really is, honestly, guys, as far as the amount of activity that goes on, it really is the most haunted place I've ever been to. Because it was just like clockwork. Just every few minutes something odd would happen, and it was crazy. So, and then I learned that Sir Humphrey's wife again was offended, and I had to explain to her what was going on because Mary Beth was doing some pretty hardcore provoking and laying out a lot of 5 words, and that was letting out a lot of 4-letter words, and that was really my fault because I was one that was like, let it fly, whatever you feel, let it go. And typically when Mary Beth provokes, she doesn't use that type of language at all, but typically she also, isn't awake for, the majority of 72 hours, So I had explained to Sir Humphrey and his wife, listen, she's a sweetheart. She typically wouldn't use that type of language. She was in a very bad mood. She had slept 3 hours in 3 days, maybe an hour or two more or less, but really she was in a bad place. And the mind starts going to a crazy place when, have you ever been truly sleep deprived? It's really weird. I've done this for a couple other different experiments that I've done before. And sleep deprivation is right along... I mean, your mind, it's almost worse than like water deprivation because with water deprivation, you'll just get incredibly angry and you'll panic. With sleep deprivation, your mind goes through many different cycles. One of the first cycles that it goes through is, everything's funny. Everything is funny. You laugh at the stupidest shit and you think things are so funny when they're not. And it's just kind of this lunacy that sits in before anger comes. So it's almost like, you feel like almost like drunk or high after like almost, 30 to 40 hours of sleep deprivation. And then that's quickly replaced by anger because the body just it's not built to do that. It's not built to not repair itself. You could also start getting fevers because your immune system is overworked. One of the most important reasons to have sleep is that your immune system works on your body and fixes and repairs things. And when you don't sleep for 3 days, or the majority of 3 days, uh, you know, you'll often start getting sick. You'll come down with colds. It's much easier to catch a virus. There's all kinds of really serious health issues that can come from sleep deprivation. And like I said, one of them is being very angry. So I explained this to Grant and his wife, and I just said, listen, she typically would never do that. Blame me. I'm sorry. It is my fault. I asked her to do this role. And, they understood. But again, I think because they didn't know what I was doing, I think they were confused overall. And I was just hoping and praying that they didn't report back to Sir Humphreys what we were doing, because I didn't want to answer his questions. I had only seen him twice, and both times I thought he was a mannequin that scared the hell out of me. So I'm thinking, if he hears bits and pieces of what we're doing, and all he knows is that every time I see him, I jump, he's going to think, these kids are whack, get him out of here. So at that time, that's one of my biggest fears, is that what we're doing is going to spill back to Sir Humphreys, and I don't want that to happen at all. So it was just a super weird morning, a super weird situation. And, Joey finally got some sleep. I talked to him, a little bit over breakfast. And, he was at the point where he was like, let's just get this done. I've waited too long. And as we discussed, the anticipation of something bad happening is often worse than that bad thing happening. And we talked about that over breakfast. And I wish that it's the one edit that I would have changed. I would have put that in the film, because it was a really intense conversation about that often, nothing in life is ever as good or ever as bad as you think it is. But the anticipation of that thing is often, worse or better than what the actual thing is. Anticipation is a crazy thing. It's your mind really running havoc, just wreaking havoc, on your emotions. And, he was definitely through with that. He was definitely through with that. So, we had our breakfast, and I told everybody that basically they had, the midday off to kind of do whatever they chose. If they wanted to check out the property anymore or walk around or see things, they could do whatever they want, but to prepare themselves, because we were going to have a big night tonight, in which everybody was relieved to have that little break. But ultimately, I could see on everybody's faces, they just wanted to get this thing going. Also, Mary Beth, after having a night's worth of sleep, she was apologetic to how she had spoken to me, and I could see she was getting, back to becoming more of herself. And, I could tell that she really just needed sleep. But what I can also say is that she was becoming more and more worried about Joe, because she knew that I didn't have any, acid or LSD or anything like that on me. I would have told her, but there was a couple times where she said to me, just to be clear, you don't have any of that stuff, right? And I was like, no, I don't. Of course not. No, absolutely not. I do not. So we gave everybody a break. Everyone took a break. So after everybody leaves, MB and I kind of hang back, and we start discussing how the night's going to go. And I'm explaining to her that Justin's portion of the experiment needs to happen first. And the reason for that is I just don't want Justin to be around Joe before Joe has to go do his experiment. And the reason being is Justin is just very much a big brother to Joe. He's like a security blanket. And I don't want Joe to have that security blanket. I want his mind to be isolated, because I want to see what happens, when he is isolated, when his brain is on fire and raging, what happens in that castle? Is there a psychokinetic effect? Okay. And I don't feel like I can really get that if Justin's going to be there to calm him down and make him feel safe. And she's like, okay, so like, what's the plan? And I'm like, well, uh, first, Justin is going to do his experiment. And I explained to her that I had made this video. And this video, guys, is like of the most disturbing things you could ever visually see. It was disgusting. It was hard for me to edit it together. It was just brutal, but it was also combined with just torturous audio. And the way we had this set up is these like two speakers are right behind Justin's ears, okay? And they were blasting. So it would go from these horrific visuals into these like block pyramid shapes of light you'd have to follow with your eyes that would be interrupted with these just blasting sound that would, you don't know when it's coming, but you know it's coming type of thing. And it was just designed to get Justin incredibly uncomfortable. And I wanted Joe to see him uncomfortable. I wanted Joe to see what he was going through to do this, because I knew that would really start freaking Joe out. Which Mary Beth was like, okay, so you're going to start Justin first so Joe could see it. I go, right. I go, but we're going to start Joey's experiment in the middle of Justin's, because in the middle of Joey's experiment, I'm going to give Joey the drugs, okay? And I'm going to tell him right before, I'm going to promise him that those drugs that I'm giving him are nothing psychedelic, no LSD, nothing like that. And she's like, okay, well, what are you going to give him? Well, what I gave him was one Norco and one Soma. Okay, it's a muscle relaxer and an opiate. And what I knew is that those two should actually calm him down and make him feel really laid back. It should not terrify him. It should not cause any psychedelic effects, anything like that. It should actually make his investigation much more chilled and laid back. I mean, they literally call that a Vegas cocktail. It's just a combination of drugs that make you feel amazing. But he doesn't know that, and I don't want him to know that. I don't want him to even know what it is that I'm giving him. But if he asks me, I'm going to tell him. But what I'm hoping that he will take the drugs without asking me what they are, and then I'll tell him what they are, but I will tell him in a way that puts doubt in his mind, like intentionally. Because what I'm trying to see is, even if he took a muscle relaxer and a pain reliever, if he mentally believes that he took LSD, like, will he start to hallucinate if he in his mind believes he has a hallucinogen in his bloodstream? I mean, what an incredible experiment. Give someone something that should make them relaxed and happy, but through their own fears, they believe they've taken a hallucinogenic substance. Through their own fears. It's like the placebo effect on full blast. If they fear that they've taken LSD, will he start experiencing the effects of somebody who has taken LSD? And what effects will that have, paranormally speaking, on what he experiences and what we all experience? And she was like, oh my God, like, Chet, he could go crazy with this. I go, no, he won't, because what he actually took will mellow him out and actually make him happier. And she's like, I don't know about this. And I'm like, just trust me on this. And she was like, okay, well, how are you going to get him to think after he took the pills that he took LSD? And I'm like, well, I think it's about nuance and about the way I answer him, because I don't want to lie to him. I promised him that I wouldn't lie to him. And she goes, well, what you should do is, make the drugs look like street drugs. And so what she did is she took this little wrapper, and and put this little spin tie around the wrapper, and then wrap the other one in just this little piece of paper. So they totally look like street drugs, because when you go and you get, when your doctor calls in, your medicine, and you go and pick it up from the pharmacy, they don't give it to you in a wrapper with a string tie around it. So I'm like, okay, that might work. That might work. Just give it to him, not say anything, tell him it's all good, and just let his own mind go to work on it from there. And she goes, yeah. She goes, I think that would work. I'm like, okay, let's do that. So she did it. And, we go back inside, and we're about ready to start Justin's, investigation, in which she says, basically, can I talk to you? And I'm like, right now? And she's like, yeah, can we talk? And I'm like, yeah, I guess. So I tell everybody, chill out. I gotta talk to Mary Beth really quickly. I'll be right back. And Kieran, by the way, is looking around like, what is going on? Like, there's a lot of movement here, and I don't know what's happening. So I go outside and I talk to Mary Beth, and she's like, okay, I don't think we should do this. And I'm like, well, we aren't. I am. I take responsibility. I'm the one saying yes to all this, not you. It's not on you. And she was like, well, I don't like this. Like, Chad, there's no EMTs here. And that was a call that I made. I did not want EMTs there, because I felt like if there are EMTs there, then that's a degree of safety, and that's going to take away the fear factor. And I want the fear factor on full bore to see what happens in this castle. And she's like, I don't like it, And she was like, obviously nothing should happen to Joey, but if something does, he's at the top of a haunted castle in the dark with no flashlight, and, he's going to be freaking out, and I don't like anything about this. And I'm like, well, it's happening. It's going down now. And, we didn't get this far to just basically punk out. I mean, like, we're going through with this, And she's like, where does this stop? And she kind of had the same, look Joey had. And she was just like, so what if, Chad? What if somebody gets killed? Like, what the fuck? And I'm like, no one's going to get killed, I'm like, yes, he's going to be freaked out. And yes, it's going to be very real for him, but he's not going to die. This is crazy. We're having this conversation. And she was just like, well, where does it stop with you? And I'm like, well, look, I can't answer that question, but I could tell you, if I felt like that Joey was going to really be hurt, then I wouldn't be doing this. I think he's going to be emotionally freaked out. And yes, emotionally hurt potentially, but not forever. Because when he gets through it, he's going to be the freaking king of this castle. He's going to be somebody who faced every fear he had in his life and overcame it. He's going to be the only person to ever have the balls to pull off something like this. And the only person to have ever done it. And I know that in Joey's lifetime, his memories, he always says it, man. He says, I measure wealth and memories, and I'm a rich man. He said it to me a million times. I measure my wealth and memories, and I'm a rich man. And I knew that this would be something that would go down his heart and his head, and this would be the story that he tells his grandkids. I just knew it in my heart, but I understood her fear. And, we had an argument. I basically just left it where, listen, this is my film. I chose to do this. Everybody signed up. We're all big boys. I'm not going to put any drugs into Joey's mouth. He can make the decision. But we're big boys, and I want to see what happens, because this is the final frontier. Everybody says it. If you guys dig into the hardcore research of the paranormal, all of the hardcore research from Lloyd Arbach on, they all talk about the same thing. The frontier that everyone wants to dig into is chemical alteration, opening the mind with drugs. Like it's not something a doctor can do, though. It's not something to get away with, but a filmmaker can. But a doctor can't, because, medical science will go, that's just crazy to even try that. But they all say the same thing, that the answers to the paranormal, the answers to spirit communication, they probably reside within chemical alteration, using different parts of the mind that are typically not used during investigations. This is the area that everyone wants to go to. But no one, but doctors can't, and most people don't have the balls to. And I chose a safe substance and a safe combination where, he would be affected, and we would have the chance to see what happened in that castle. when this part of his mind was open. So I told her, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. And I said, it's on me, it's not on you. And I fully understand if you don't want to continue, but just please don't mess this up. We're set, we're ready to go. I have the timing down, I'm ready to do this. And she said, okay. And I knew the last very important step that I had to pull off, and I couldn't do it until Joey had already taken the drugs, until he was already up in the castle, was telling Kieran what I did. Because there's a real chance that he might just go, hey, fuck this, I'm out. I'm out. And right before it all happened, he talked to me. He was like, I have some real concerns here because Joey is absolutely freaked out. He's scared of this place. He's scared of what you're saying you're going to do to him. And, I don't know what you're planning on doing at this point, but I have concerns and I want you to know that. And again, he's a parapsychologist and a doctor. So, of course he's going to put that out there, and he should have. So I've got a lot on my shoulders at this point. I'm just like, I got to pull this off perfectly as far as timing goes. And then I am, in a lot of ways, I'm the experiment as well, because I really want, hope, and am banking on things going right. So I'm hoping that psychokinetically I can make them go right. So I go back inside, I get everybody together, and I say, Justin, it is your turn. And I take him with me back into this room where we have this all set up for him. And I'm like, you need to sit here and watch this video. It's 14 minutes long. Watch it once, wait 10 seconds, start over, watch it again. And then once you're done, make your way up 3 flights of stairs to King Edward Longshanks' bedroom. And you need to go sit in there and just lock the door once you get in and stay up there for 2 hours, and let's see what happens. You don't have to provoke. You can provoke. You can do whatever. But that is basically your experiment. And he's like, okay. And he goes in there, and I'm like, hey, you ain't going to enjoy this. He's like, yeah, I didn't think so, Chad. I didn't think so. That's why I didn't even want to talk about it, because I didn't want to anticipate it. But let's get this done. So I come back in the room, and you could hear Justin start the video. And nobody has seen what's on this video but me yet. And it is just disturbing footage. And you can hear it, though. You can hear the madness coming off this video. And the sound is echoing. It is just echoing through the entire castle. And it's freaking everybody out. And Joey is just pacing like a mad dog. Like a mad dog. And I walk to the back of the room and I go, Joey, calm down. Calm down. And he looks at me and he goes, dude, I am not taking fucking LSD. Understand that. I go, Joey, I know. He goes, no, Chad, listen to me. He's like, I am not taking LSD. I'm like, Joey, I know. Calm down. Just keeps pacing. Just keeps pacing. Keeps pacing. Justin finally gets done, and I could see everyone is so freaked out. Kieran had a chance to see a part of the video, and he's explaining it to Mary Beth. He's going, did you see what is on that video and what is going? Everybody is freaked out. Freaked freaking out. And all of a sudden, Graham comes walking through the door, and he's got this oh my God look on his face. And I'm like, what's up? And he was like, nobody called for me? I'm like, no. And he goes, nobody yelled my name. And we're like, no. He goes, huh. I thought for sure somebody yelled for me. I go, no. I don't know. Maybe you're hearing the stuff on the tape from Justin or something. He's like, no. Somebody yelled my name. And Graham has this Cockney version of English accent. It's weird. It's like Scottish meets the Queen's English. It's really hard to understand. And half the time I was like, Graham, I'm going to need a translator on that one, man. And basically what he said is he was walking down the hallway and he heard somebody call out his name. And it wasn't us. I didn't include that in the film just because there was nothing. We had no audio that caught anything calling out his name, but he was certain of it. He was certain of it. And I could see on his face, he had a weird feeling too. He had a really weird feeling. And I stepped to the back of the room and I looked. Mary Beth was really, really worried. She was being quiet. Kieran was slowly pacing back and forth. Graham looked freaked out. Joey was just pacing like a rabid animal. Justin was up there just mortified. And I'm like, this is the perfect mental nightmare. This is how you test the power of the human mind. Emotionally, mentally, everyone was on the edge. That building was supercharged with emotional energy. If I'm correct, really, really soon, we should all be experiencing some paranormal fireworks. But you'll find out if I was right on the forthcoming episode